Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you, and welcome back to the place to hear real reports of cryptids and the unexplained. Tonight, we are diving into the mysterious world of Bigfoot, with 4 true reports and sightings sent in by you, my viewers. From the Erie Forest of British Columbia to the Smoky Mountains of Virginia, these stories are all fascinating, but just might leave you a bit leery about what's really out there in those forests. So hurry up. Grab your boots and let's ride to Bigfoot country.
Number 1. Hey, Tattooed Biker. This happened to me while I was completing my Canadian Armed Forces medical care portion in Chilliwack, British Columbia in 2011. I'm going to keep this short. Around late spring of that year, I was driving a rented old Ford Bronco around Cutlass Lake, and I was just coming around the sharp bend on the road that heads around the lake, right before you get up to the small farm community on the Canadian-U.S. border. It was about 2:30, and I noticed a deer in the middle of the road. And I thought to myself, the poor thing must have been hit. So I continued on for my little excursion. I turned around at the bend and headed back along the border, back to the main road. I did this drive almost nightly. I came around the turn completely forgetting about the deer until I saw it. A thick, dark brown, black fur-covered creature was eating the deer carcass. Whatever it was turned and looked me square in the eyes. It glared at me with these black eyes. I couldn't see any detail, just the reflection of the truck's lights, and it wasn't staring at the high beams. It knew where I sat. My blood pressure spiked immediately, and then this ringing in my ears began. This was fear. This was true fear. I had never experienced anything like this before. It picked up the deer by its throat and stood up, and it was taller than the vehicle. And then it walked off into the woods towards the mountain. I rolled forward and rolled down the window and dimmed the lights in the cab, and it was still looking at me. The smell of death. Yeah, it was death. By that time, I was used to the smell. And it made a sound to this day that I can't forget, this deep growl, like a deep vocal warning, low and loud. Needless to say, I got out of there as fast as I could. What did I see? Was this a Bigfoot? Is anyone out there familiar with the area who maybe have seen something or heard something similar? Thanks. Signed, Kent. Number 2. Hello, Biker. I apologize for taking up your time, but this story is as real as it gets, and it happened to my grandfather and me back in the 1990s. My grandfather lived in Rochester, Indiana, along the Tippecanoe River. Across that river was a wildlife preserve that also used to be a camp. Well, the camp has been run down and the building dilapidated and was very eerie. And it sits at the corner of the river where it bends at the sandbar. My grandfather and I were hanging out limb lines for catfish. We hung them every night and grabbed them in the morning to see if we caught anything. Well, 3 nights in a row our lines were ripped down and laid on the bank. Now these lines were very strong and it would take a lot of power to snap them. They're the same type used to catch gators. They were ripped off, or the whole limb was ripped off and put on the bank. One night, my grandfather and I were going down to check out fishing poles while tightlining along our side of the bank. We had seen a rabbit jump into the water and swim across earlier in the day, and we thought that was weird, but when we went down to check our poles, we heard a splash out in the river. My grandfather said that it was probably another rabbit swimming across the river. Then we heard another splash, and it was much louder than the last one. Finally, we both stop and try to see in the dark as best as possible. We only had a glow-in-the-dark bobber for light, so looking across the river was out of the question. The next thing I heard sent chills down my spine and has stuck with me forever. I never knew what it was until I saw a documentary called Discovering Bigfoot. The growl recorded in that video was the exact same sound that we heard that night. It was from the bellows of the gut. I just wanted to share this experience with you. Thanks. Signed, Dave. Number 3. Hey TB, I'm a San Jose, California native and have frequented the adjacent Santa Cruz Mountains all my life. This incident happened on the Loma Prieta Grade Trail in the forest of Nassim Mark State Park in the late summer of 2019. My girlfriend at the time and I were hiking on a Wednesday morning, and there were already people around. This is a popular trail as it's a really beautiful locale. That said, there were also stretches when it was just the two of us. I think it's a 5-mile hike total, and we were about an hour in when my girlfriend had to relieve herself. There were thick trees on both sides, so we looked for a clearing on our right side. We saw not really a path, but an opening, and walked past a tree line maybe 20 to 30 feet in. She wanted to make sure she was out of sight of anyone who might pass by. I tossed her my backpack, which had toilet paper, and she ducked behind a tree. I walked back down the clearing about halfway, and I'm just waiting. Like I said, she was just out of my sight for a second. It was darker inside the trees, obviously, but I could still see just fine. So I'm standing there with nothing to do but look around. And that's when I caught the movement of something over on my left. There was a distinct medium-sized tree with a very dark hand on it. It was about 10 or so feet away. At first I thought it was someone wearing black gloves. I don't know why, but I immediately thought it was some biker pervert looking in on my girlfriend. That's when I saw the face peek out and everything turned upside down. I can't say with full certainty, but I'd say this thing was 7 to 8 feet tall easy. I'm 6'2" myself. I only saw half of it, but it was everything you would expect to see from the classic description of Bigfoot. Big, black eyes, large flat nose, dark-skinned with blackish-grayish hair. I could see a hint of a conical skull. Really based on nothing in particular, I feel like I was seeing a female. I'm not sure why, I just do. Anyway, it peeked back and forth twice. These eyes, they were mesmerizing. That's the best way to describe it. I felt like they were looking right through my soul. I wasn't really scared, but I was definitely in shock, like the way seeing a car accident feels, like everything is in slow motion. And let me confirm what others have said, there was no way that I had the thoughts to pull out my phone and take a picture. No way. I was totally engrossed in that moment, and this was all in the space of maybe 20 to 30 seconds. The second time it peeked out, it looked at me for a few seconds and then ducked back behind the tree, but also sank like it was going into the ground. That was the last I saw of it. My girlfriend finally finished, and when she came back towards me, that was when the fear really hit me. Not like I was in danger right at that moment, but more like the reality of what I'd saw finally hit me. I quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her back onto the trail. I didn't say what I saw, but I said we had to go back right now. She was deeply confused, but I explained to her what I saw as we walked at a much brisker pace than we came up. She believed me. She's Canadian and has an uncle and a cousin who claimed to see one when she was growing up, so that was good. She actually wanted to turn around and see if we could find it, but I wasn't quite in that space just after it happened. I'd say I was generally a Bigfoot believer before this, but not anywhere near a fanatic or anything. And it's not like I set out looking for anything. I know people argue that If you have Bigfoot on the brain, then you're more likely to jump to that conclusion in certain situations. Well, I did not. In fact, the whole hike I was complaining to my girlfriend about my manager at work who kept messing with my work schedule. Bigfoot was the last thing on my mind. I'm okay with what happened, but I had strange dreams for weeks after. My girlfriend thought it was a great story and she'd tell our friends over beers and stuff, but I'm just not really comfortable with people knowing. But like I said, I'm far away from it now, so I can at least share it here. Yeah, it's possible. A huge guy in a suit was out there at the exact time and that exact spot, but I just don't think so. I'm 99% sure that I saw a Sasquatch, and I just really wanted to share my story with you. Signed, Micah. Number 4. Dear TB, this is the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced. This happened about 4 years ago, when my boyfriend and I were still fresh into the relationship. My sister had recommended me a snorkeling trip for a fun thing to do with him. We went to Lake Phoenix, located in Brunswick County, Virginia. It's a quarry surrounded by a campground, and it's best known for its crystal clear water for diving. There's apparently a helicopter and school bus that people dive down there to see. My boyfriend and I decided to go camping for the night. While we were checking in, we separately both got a bad feeling about the whole place, but each kept it to ourselves until after we left. So at first, it was all really a good time. We snorkeled in the shallow area of the quarry, and although the depth of the water was a bit uncanny, I still was enjoying myself. The water's about 65 feet deep, so once you swim out of the shallow area, it immediately dropped off and was pitch black. This is actually where I realized that I'm terrified of deep water. Besides the deep, dark water where you were swimming, there's still something very scary about that lake, in that it's perfectly still. I assume because it's a quarry and the water doesn't have a current. My boyfriend and I are winding down our night and we're back at our campsite. Now we're camping in a grassy patch down a hill from the road. Our tent is pitched in a wooded area that our campsite is extended to, and just across the green is a campsite that looks well lived in, but our neighbors were out. We're just making hot dogs over the fire when the neighbors get back. It's nighttime now, and they immediately go to sleep. I'd say 20 to 30 minutes after they get back is when things started to become spooky. My boyfriend and I were just chatting when we noticed a dark figure watching us from up the hill. Because of the shadow of the fire, we couldn't actually make out the characteristics of the figure, but what I could tell, it looked really huge, just completely massive and very, very tall. We knew it was staring directly at us, almost trying to hide behind our neighbor's truck. It had watched us for what felt like forever until it started walking down the road again. We both watched it in dead silence, watching it walk out and behind the trees, the same ones connected to our campsite, but that also went in between us and it. I kept expecting each time I'd see it walk forward, out from behind a tree, but then it suddenly stopped appearing. I was totally freaked out. Where did it go? I watched my boyfriend looking at what happened and thinking the same thing, but he had shrugged it off, and I naively did too. We actually ended up forgetting about it and went to the quarry late that night. It was beautiful seeing the stars reflected against the still water, but the deep, now all black water was still terrifying to say the least. We walked back to our campsite, laid in our tent, and smoked a cigarette. I soon began to get an uneasy feeling which I was trying to ignore, telling myself it's because I was just creeped out from the darkness. After some silence between us, my boyfriend says to me, "Do you feel like we're being watched?" And I said, "Why would you say that?" I was half joking, but serious because I was scared. My boyfriend wanted to get out from the tent, so we're standing by my car, and I get this stupid idea that being in the middle of the field is the safest place for us. My logic being that if someone was going to come up to us, at least we'd see them coming. So we're out in the middle of this field now when we see a similar looking shadow figure, just like the one from earlier, staring at us. It must have been about 20 yards away. We both notice it while walking, and it's walking in the same direction as we are. We change directions, and it does too. We tell one another if we change again, and it does too, that we're booking it back to my car. When we change, it follows us, and we take off. I watched it from my back seat as it slowly walked into the darkness while still staring in our direction. My boyfriend at this point says to me, "Let's get out of here." I agree, but all our camping gear is outside. We quietly get our things together, not trying to freak the other one out. The weirdest part of this story, in my opinion, is the next part. My headlights suddenly weren't working, and there was a weird fog over my windshield that didn't go away, no matter what we did. We had to drive out of those woods with only low beams and a strange fog over the window. We barely could see, but eventually got out of there. Weirdly enough, the fog went away as soon as we got to the gas station. We got home around 1 a.m. and I told my dad the story the next day, and he said that we got out of there, or else we could have been attacked. Apparently, 2 people have died at that campground while snorkeling, which I found out. My boyfriend and I think it was either a person stalking us or an upright creature. We've kind of just settled on the creature because what happened was an unexplained incident, and the general size and shape of the shadowy figure that we kept seeing. Thanks for reading. Signed, Amber. And there it is. All I have for tonight on this journey through the world of Bigfoot encounters. If you've had your own encounter or another story to share, feel free to send it to the email in the description of this video, and your story might just wind up in a future episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true cryptid content and true encounters with the unexplained. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the roadaways. Biker out.